Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm using the Mega Savannah pack from Wandering Rabbit to create my card. It includes 8 animal images, plus multiple scene builders and a heap of sentiments. It's an amazing value pack. I'm using the little meerkat today in one of the background builders, so I'll be doing some ink blending of the background, some Copic colouring of the meerkat and the rock and plants that he's sitting on, plus doing some die cuts and heat embossing of the sentiments. So let's get started. So I've printed my image out on some Copic Express cardstock and already run that through my die cutting machine with a double stitch rectangle die to create my panel. I've also printed out on some masking paper the image and the background builder as well, because I will be doing some ink blending behind this little beautiful little meerkat. So I'm just going to fussy cut around the image. Sometimes I do find it's best to cut away any excess masking paper that you've got, because it does make it easier to turn that image around while you're doing your fussy cutting. I just like to keep my scissors straight and just trim and actually just move the image around. It does make fussy cutting much easier to actually just move the image rather than your scissors. And with this background builder, it's got nice thick black lines, so it works out quite well in cutting out for a mask. So I'm just going to finish cutting around the leaves and then around that rock, and then we're ready to apply our mask to our image. So I've lined this up. I've just turned the panel on its side because I find it's easier to work from one end and go to another. So sometimes you will have to just lift it up and make sure that you're putting it in exactly the right spot so you get all the coverage. So you'll see me try and do it multiple times to make sure everything is lined up well. So now that we've got that, then you give it a good press down, so make sure it sticks when you're doing your ink blending. So I'll be using my Distress Oxides today in Shabby Shotters, Crushed Olive and Forest Moss. And I will be using some ink blending brushes because I do find they work a lot better on Copic Express It. Sometimes with the sponge applicators, because of the smooth surface of the Copic Express It, it can scuff it up if you do go over multiple times, where I find that these brushes are just a lot softer. So my lightest colour down the bottom is the Shabby Shutters. Then we've got the Crushed Olive in the middle. And now I'm just applying that Forest Moss to the top and working that between each of those colours. So just keep going in with each of your colours, working it up to get a nice smooth blend between each layer. And just work in circular motions because it does make for a smoother blend when you do that. So I accidentally put some Shabby Shutters up the top, but thankfully it's a lighter colour, so I was able to get that Forest Moss over the top. Back in with the Crushed Olive, and then the final blend out with the Shabby Shutters. Now I should have stopped and not taken this off until it had dried, because I do get some colour down the bottom. So I do like to have a look at like a real meerkat or whatever image that I'm actually going to be colouring, and try and match in with the actual colours for my image. So as you can see, I had my little meerkat image on the side, so I'm working out what colours to use. As I was showing you, there is those colours down the bottom where I put my fingers on that rock, but because it will be quite dark, that didn't actually end up mattering having that colour down there. But it is always best to take your mask off once that ink blending has dried. Now I've just gone in with my lightest colour to work out where all my shadows will be. I'm just going to have the kind of sun shining from the above. It's kind of like he's in the middle of a bit of grassland with all that green in the background, and he's just sitting on his rock. So I'm just now putting in the darkest colour, which is my E44, to get my shadows in. Then coming in to blend that out with my E43. And as you can see, I'm just working in like little flicking motions to get my colours blended out. So now we're going in down the sides, and obviously his little arms will be throwing a little bit of shadow. Also a lot of shadow down the base where he's sitting on that rock, and also his tail will be in a little bit of shadow. Now we'll blend that out with the E42, just blending into that highlight space and just flicking up as we go. And then we'll come in with our lightest color that we use to lay down our shadows, which is the E41, and then blend out into that white space completely. Now I am going to come in again and use the exact same colors to reinforce all my shadows. So I will now bring in the E44 again and just go back over everything, just making sure we've got a nice transition and making sure those shadows are really showing. So we'll get our little sides in around his paws and down the bottom where his little feet are. And we'll blend that out again with the E43. So I'm kind of flicking up between his nose, up above and below where that E44 is. And then just working through to his cheek and to the tops of his head, down his arms and around. And just working into that cute little soft little belly that he's got there. So I'm just going to keep him smooth today. I'm not going to worry about any like little fur marks other than just those little lines around his nose. But otherwise it's going to be, because their fur is quite short, it doesn't look too bad when we've got him quite smooth like this. And we'll come in now again with our final color, the E41, and do our final blend out. And that's the little meerkat body all colored up. Now I'm just going to color in his mouth just with two colors, a darker color with the W5 and then the E04, and color up his tongue. Now they do have these little black black portions with his eyes and his ears. So I'm just going to use my W markers for this, starting with my darkest color, which is the W7, blend out with the W5 and into his little tail there. And the final color will be the W3. So now that's all blended out. To make sure we'll reinforce that, I'm just going to go over that again because it kind of had faded out that darkest W7. So now we'll do the W5 and then finish off with the W3. So we'll just do a little quick 2-layer color of that. So that just makes his little eyes pop. Now I always like to kind of put some shadows in those little white portions of the eyes. So I've just brought in my C markers to blend that out. Now I'm going to do a base layer of E43 to get kind of like a brown look to the rock, but then I'm going to use my grey markers in different types of marker. So I'm going in with my darkest color, the N6, to throw all my shadows. So shadows down the bottom and obviously where the meerkat will be throwing that. Then I'm going to change over to a W4, so it's a bit of a warmer marker, and blend out that N marker, the N6. So just working down to where our highlight will be. So initially I went into with my C2, but I think it needs re-inking and I didn't like how that blended out. So I grabbed my W marker, my W2 marker, and went over that. So I'm going to go again. I'm not going to worry about putting the brown E43 in. I'm just going to use the grey markers and reinforce all those shadows with my N6, blending out with my W4, just flicking up into that lighter space. And then just come in with the W2 to blend out our highlight portion. And that, I think, gives the rock a nice realistic look. So I'm going in now to color up our little plant behind him with the YG01. So I'm going to now put our darkest color, the YG99, to put our shadows in. So obviously each of the little leaves will throw a shadow on the other one. And then also that will be at the lower portions in shadow as well. So blend out with the YG95, just flicking up into that light space. Then my second last color is the YG03. And then we'll go back to our original color, the YG01, to go over our highlight. So we'll blend that up so we've got a nice kind of striking little highlight there. And then again, I didn't go in again with the darkest color, the YG99, but I'm going back in with the YG95 just to reinforce my shadows. And we'll just blend that out with our other two colors, the YG03 and the YG01, just to reinforce that shadowing. So now we'll fill it in with that YGO1, and that's all our colouring done. I'll be using the Lawn Fawn Henry's ABCs to do my wild portion of my sentiment, but you can use any kind of word dyes that you have in your stash. So I do want to do a little bit of ink blending to kind of match in with the Meerkat's colour. So I'll be using Vintage Photo. So I'll just be using a single colour. So I'm going in really heavy down the bottom and then just lightening my grip up on my sponge applicator as I move up into that white space, so that we've got kind of a nice little transition of colour. So it's good how you can kind of use one single colour to create a multiple kind of layered look to our card. So I've set that aside for a little while to dry, and now I'm just going to line up my wild word. So we want it quite dark down the bottom and then just lightening up to that white space at the top. So I'm just going to line that up. You don't have to do it all together, but I'm just going to do one pass through my die cutting machine. So I'm going to tape that down so that they're all kind of identically marked along that line, and run that through my die cutting machine. And I'll just show you what one of them looks like. So a W had fallen out, so you've got that beautiful kind of ombre look. As you know, I like a little bit of dimension in my word dies, so I'm going to cut out the wild again in black cardstock twice. So I'll run that through twice through my die cutting machine, and then I'm going to glue the two black letters together. So I'll just show you me doing one, which is the W. So we're going to just stack that up completely on the top, and then we're going to offset the actual ink blended WILD over the top. So I'm going to only put glue down on one side where I'm going to offset it. So you'll see everything I've done is put to the right, and I'm just going to offset that ink blended W to the right. So now you've got a nice little black shadow. So I'll show you again with the eye. Just down that right hand side, grab that ink blended one and just pop it to the right, and now you've got a nice little offset black shadow, and I'll do it to the other two off screen. Now for the rest of my sentiment, I'm going to be using the Lawn Fawn Wild For You stamp set. So eventually my sentiments will read, "Have a wild birthday." So I'm just going to do some white heat embossing on black cardstock. So I've just grabbed a piece of black cardstock and just popped in those two sentiments. So I'm going to do them separately, but we can do them on the same piece. I popped some anti-static powder tool in there, and just using my Watermark Ink, just going to give that a stamp. So it was really good press with that one stamp. Now I'm going to grab my Stampendous white heat embossing powder and give that a double cover. And then I've preheated my heat tool and just gone into the back first, and then just come to the front and get that all nice and melted. So it's great having this glass mat because you can actually do it straight against that. Now that that's dry, I'm just going to wipe off the excess powder with my cloth, making sure that's nice and clean. Now you can see I've got a little smudge down there. I obviously wiped it before it was quite dry, so just be careful that you do allow it time to dry. And now I've grabbed out my tonic trimmer and just going to cut these down to some little sentiment strips. So this trimmer is great because it's got that beautiful little grid mark on there, which makes it easy to line up and get the perfect amount of size on that strip either side. So trim that down, just line that up with the grid, making sure it's straight. And now you've got two beautiful sentiment strips. So I've grabbed out my Frisker's trimmer and I'm just going to cut my card base to size. That's going to measure 4.2 centimeters by 22.6, scored at 11.3. And I'll get that folded and we'll set that aside while we actually work on our card panel. So now I'm going to just line up where everything's going to sit on the card front. And I just want those like little letters offset. So I'm just kind of working out, some will face to the left, some will face to the right. We'll have the have a at the top, and then just got to work out where we're going to have the birthday portion of our sentiment. So I'm just working out just to make sure we've got enough room for everything and we're not going to obscure our little meerkat too much. So that looks really good. And now I don't know whether to put the birthday under there. I don't want to cover him up too much, and I think the birthday might get a little bit lost down the bottom. So I think up the top, just under the wild, looks good. So I've just grabbed out my old phone to take a picture so I know where everything needs to go. And we'll get some black foam squares on the back of our sentiment strips, so that's nice and popped up like our wild sentiment. So now that I've got that all placed on, I'm just going to pull off the release paper, and we're going to use my little tweezers to get that nice and lined up straight up the top. So give that a good press down, and then we'll organize where our wild's going to sit and get that glued down next before we pop our birthday in down the bottom. So I'm just lining everything up, and then we'll get our glue out. So we'll go with the W first and get that glued down. Just putting a little bit of glue with our precision glue tool. Now you've got to be very careful. You only want to go in once with this because it can actually smudge your ink blending. So be very careful when placing these down with the glue onto your ink blended panel. We'll pop the D in next, and then that way we can work our way in with the L and the I. And so we'll get the L in next, or actually no, I might pop the I on next, making sure we've got a good amount of space between the W and where the L will be, offsetting that to the right, and then we'll offset the L to the left after we've got a little bit of glue down. And I did get a little bit out, but I was able just to wipe that up before it caused any discoloration to my card panel. Now we'll get our birthday in, lining that up underneath. Now because we've got a bit of dimension in the wild and the sentiment, I'm just going to glue this directly onto my card base. So I pop some glue on the back of my panel, just lining that up with our card base, which leaves a nice little border around the outside. I just wipe off to make sure I don't have any glue on my fingers that could potentially mark my panel. And I'm just going to pop that under the book to weigh that down while it dries. And this is a finished card for this tutorial. This little meerkat is so gorgeous, and with all the little added extras with the seam builders that come with the set, you can make some really gorgeous Savannah inspired cards. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. If you have, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.